All right, you guys, welcome. This is Coach Aaron with Full Circle Coaching, and I'm here today with Garrett Rock, right?
Rock, yep.
Yep, from Athlete Blood Test. This is one of our affiliate sponsors. We've been working with them for the past 3 years, and I have used their services a couple of times, and a couple of the athletes have taken advantage of the ease that Athlete Blood Test offers us as athletes. And I just wanted to introduce you guys again, Athlete Blood Test, all my athletes to Athlete Blood Test, just because we are sometimes in need of more information when we're training and racing for triathlon. So Garrett, why don't you tell a little bit of the history about Athlete Blood Test and how it came to be?
Sure. So we've been around since 2007. We started with, or as an observational study. In 2007, we had a number of coaches that banded together and brought to several of the world's top Ironman athletes, 10 of them to be exact. And all of these athletes had undergone some level of testing, whether at that time, this was a while ago, so physiological testing, or testing through their primary care providers. And what they had noticed was great variability in the recommendations and the findings that were coming back, especially on the blood tests. They were finding a lot of tests that were outside of what were considered normal ranges. And so I was recruited to become part of a study with these athletes. And for a full year, we basically tested everything that we could under the sun. And what we found was really not a whole lot, other than there's a lot of variability by individual in how they utilize micronutrients. So the rate at which they utilize the nutrients that they take in via the diet, needs for supplements. And we also identified that there are very likely different normal ranges for these athletes. Exactly. So that launched us into full research mode and moving well beyond 10 athletes, because you're not going to get statistical significance with 10 athletes. Right. And over the next, it was about 7 years or so, what we identified through hundreds, thousands of athletes were new normal ranges for certain micronutrients. We identified how to predict response to training, recovery needs, and nutritional needs that are unique to the individual. And now, in the last several years, we've been able to add genetic testing to this. And we're in a place now where we really can predict the response to a nutritional strategy and a training strategy for an individual based on tests that we run. So, well, we usually start with a statement, and that statement is: genetics and environmental factors influence nutritional needs in response to training. By environmental factors, we're talking about intestinal health. We're talking about the environment in which you're training in, the humidity, the temperatures, and we're talking about the actual training plan. And so those two things highly influence nutritional needs in response to training, and they're highly variable among individuals. So we've identified that a way to figure out what an individual needs are, and thus provide that information to the coaches who can use it to better train their athletes.
Right. So just as an example, I have had probably over 5 athletes that have used the service in the last couple of years, but they were in dire need. And it's one of those things that you really don't want to wait that long, right? When you're so depleted and you're so feeling bad. Honestly, I really recommend, your doctor recommends, once a year blood test, but this one is specific to athletes because it's looking for markers that will affect your performance, right?
Correct. Yeah. And ranges are much different in some instances for athletes than the general population. Yeah.
And I've always been told, like, even my, when you from my holistic lifestyle coaching education, my mentor was like, you don't want to be compared to the generic or the normal range for a normal blood test is like walking into the middle of Walmart and looking around. general. You don't really want to be in that range, right? You want to, we're athletes, right? We're high performing athletes. We're training our bodies. It's a lot of stress. So we have, like you said, different needs and different markers to be looking for. And this is what your company specifically looks at, right?
Correct. Part of our early study was also identifying what markers are important to study or to look at in athletes based on gender, age, frequency, duration, and of training. And that's what we've done. Is our panels are really tailored to what stresses the athletes are putting on their body. And you mentioned it, stresses. We are not the folks at Walmart, if we're going to stereotype.
Right.
We're folks that are putting exceptional stresses on our body, which is going to increase nutritional needs, and for individuals, very specific nutritional needs. And that's what, in identifying that, usually athletes are finding benefit in how they feel during their training and how they perform.
Right. And so when you have, do you have athletes that train several or test several times in a year at different periods during their training, right?
Yeah, we really have. If you look at how athletes use our system now, it's a newer offering, and I'm not sure athletes really understand the benefits of it yet. And so we do get a lot of users. We're over 50% of users are symptomatic right now. You mentioned the athletes that we're not feeling well and they use us. The goal is to catch athletes before there is ever a problem, and really catch them before they even start really ramping up training, because that's where we can identify the needs. So we have athletes that use us preventatively in the endurance sports world, and then we have symptomatic athletes. We work a lot with pro teams too, so we've got a heavy presence in the NFL, for example, and those teams, it's 3 tests a year on all their athletes.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's very, very cool. So just to let you know, it's so easy when you go to their website. Actually, we should just pull up the website just because we can give the athletes a look, and maybe you can explain the different options. Hopefully my internet's working. Yes. Okay. So let me see. Are all the, so there's different levels of testing, right?
Correct.
These are the 4 different levels. And I think I did the gold panel just because I think that was the one I did before. So I wanted to compare all the same things. And I always add on the hormone test, just because as a female, that's just something that's really important to me. As I'm almost 50 and I train a lot. So I always want to make sure that my hormones are looking good too. So, but maybe you can explain the different tests.
Sure. So these are our 4 tests right now, and then I'll give you a little secret about a new product that's coming out in the summer that we haven't told anybody about yet. But our Platinum panel is really our highest testing offering, and that combines genetic tests with the Gold panel blood test, and the 2 interact very importantly. If we're trying to get a really deep insight into the physiology of an athlete. So by testing genetics, you're going to see predispositions, trends, what they're likely to show as in the blood. But the blood often doesn't align. In fact, in our research right now, we're almost 30% of folks have misaligned blood findings from genetic findings, and that's going to be environmental influences. A lot of times it's absorption rates, it's gastrointestinal inflammation, just some other unique factor. But identifying what those factors are is really, really powerful, because then we know a long-term fix. So the Platinum panel, we're going to, like I said, we're going to, through genetics, identify trends, and then we're going to identify real-time status through blood, and then that's going to tell us a story about physiology in the individual. The Gold panel, Yeah, go
Quick
ahead.
question before we move on, because I did like 23andMe, a long time ago. And so I have that genetic base, but I find it really, what you just said makes so much more sense to have a blood work done at the same time, because then you can see where it's misaligned. Is that what you're explaining?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay, so that makes more sense to me. I wish I'd talked to you before I did my test.
We'll do
Right?
that one in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, because it would be good to see, because the genetic testing is so popular right now, and it kind of, people see that and they freak out, because, oh, they're doing endurance sports and maybe it says that they're not supposed to be, that kind of thing, right? And you're saying that your blood work can actually, if it's not lining up with your genetic testing, that's usually an environmental reason or a training reason or an external reason. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And what's important to understand is that they don't often align, like
Right.
you said, and I
Yeah.
said. And so genetic testing alone is interesting,
Yes.
but it doesn't go far beyond that.
Right.
Blood testing is real-time status, and so blood testing really is the gold standard for athlete
Mhm.
assessment, but genetic testing allows us a deeper insight into what the actual environmental influence is.
Right. That's so
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So now it makes sense, because actually the last time I did the test, you didn't have the platinum. You didn't have the genetic
Right.
testing. Right. That's new. And how soon, how long ago?
In the last year and a half or so, it took a while to get statistical significance on that for all of the different categories that we have. We're tailoring to the individual, and so there's a lot of different groups of people that we have to get statistical significance for before we can launch a product.
Okay, cool. And that's just a swab of your mouth, right? In your mouth?
Correct. Yep,
Okay.
we send the kit. We send the kit to your house, and you swab and send it in, and usually 3 to 4 weeks later we have results. And what we do is we report on the blood as soon as we get them. So you're usually getting that report within 3 to 5 days, and then we're going to add information to that blood report
Right.
once we have the genetic findings. So you get a whole new report.
That is so cool. Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. Okay, so then explain the gold test by itself.
So the gold was used to be our highest offering, and it really is, the gold standard of athlete blood testing. What we've done is we're just testing what we need to test. So it's really appealing to athletes to go out and order these tests that are really robust. They test everything under the sun, and it's just an unnecessary cost. So we have so much data on athletes that we've identified certain tests that are really important, that have a high incidence of being in what we call a risk range, or an outside of normal range for an athlete. Um, but we don't provide much beyond that. So in the gold panel, we're really looking at tolerance to training, response to training, and micronutrient needs for the athlete. And I guess those are the most important things. How are you tolerating your current training plan, and what do you need to eat to accommodate the current stresses that you're putting on your body?
Okay, cool. Well, I want to go through mine that I just did, because I actually have some new results that I've never seen before, and I definitely want to review mine. But then I wanted to just real quick talk about the add-on testing for the gold panel. So you see the genetic testing, you can add it on separately, but you get a better deal, I guess, when you do it through the platinum plan. Is that why?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then that's a consult. So if they wanted to have a consult with you, this would be, or one of the doctors there, yes?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and then a dietitian would be someone through yours, which you don't need to do that because I'm that
That's
person.
right.
Yes. And then the lipid panel, explain what a lipid panel is.
So that's just your LDL, VLDL, HDL, your cholesterol panel.
Right, cholesterol. So I added mine on there, and then I also did, I think, the C-reactive protein. And why is the C-reactive protein important?
It's an inflammatory marker, so it helps us identify the inflammatory response to training. So if you went and did a workout the day before, the day of, 5 days before, we can see how efficient your body is at clearing, that inflammatory response, which influences training tolerance and recovery recommendations.
Now, do you honestly ever see a triathlete's blood work that doesn't have that high a number for the C-reactive protein?
Most people are going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to carry inflammation because of, I mean, you're training usually 6 days a week, 5 at the very least, right? Yeah, so it's going to be elevated. It's just how, basically how elevated is it? And if we have more than one test, we've seen that more than one time, then we can really pin down just how big that response is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go through mine in a minute, but the bronze is just super basic, so it doesn't really cover as much, but it's the least expensive test. But you would definitely recommend the gold, yeah?
Yeah. My favorite is a platinum, of course, but that is spendy and not all people can afford it. The
Right.
gold is I believe gold is almost 70% of orders in our system. Platinum is another like 15, and
Okay.
then bronze makes up really most of the rest. Bronze is meant to be your snapshot right before a race.
Okay.
You either you had a test early season and got all the information. Now you're about to hit your A race and you just want a quick systems check. Bronze is perfect for that.
Okay. Cool. Close my email. And then what's the black test?
So the black is our really white glove service. It's a phlebotomist is going to show up at your home or your place of work. You're going to get somebody just holding your hand through the whole process. You're going to get the post-test consult, which is one of our sports science experts are going to walk through the results with you. It's just true white glove service. Yep.
Well, one year, maybe you guys could come with us to camp and you could do everyone's blood work right before. That would be really cool.
We've done that before and we'd love to do it again for you.
Yeah, so maybe we'll add that on. My camp is coming up in 2 weeks, so this is where I'm going to be playing this interview. So definitely let's try to line this up for next year to make it happen, because I think that would be such an awesome add-on to the services at camp. You know what I mean?
Yep. And we wouldn't have to charge the ABT Black for the private draw then.
Okay, cool. That'd be awesome. Okay, so let's go through my blood test. So like I said, I mean, I usually get blood work done at least once a year. I skipped last year. I don't really know why, but overall, I'm healthy, right? So that's good to hear. But there were some things that, another finding is slightly above normal TSH, but still within normal. So we don't have to go over these action steps. I want to go like down and see how it lays out so everybody else can see how it looks. But the one thing that I was really surprised about, and this is a question I had for you, is like, I eat so many vegetables. Like, the one thing that popped out to me was that I didn't have enough folate in my system. And for me, I eat raw nuts and seeds on a daily basis. I eat tons of broccoli, asparagus, spinach every day. I work to have like over 10 servings of vegetables a day. And so I was really surprised to see this folate that I didn't have, the number wasn't high. So I wanted to ask you if you thought if there's any other things that would affect folate that I could see about.
Yeah, so there's really a couple, the most prominent possibilities here statistically in our system are either you have a really high utilization, there's some absorption barrier, or number 3 is genetically you rapidly metabolize folate into an untested form. And this is where the genetic tests help us identify, is this a true deficiency, or is this that blood isn't the best way to assess your folate? Although folate, we're testing several metabolites of it in the blood, and so it's pretty unusual to see false lows in folate. More often than not, if we see consistently high folate, then we become concerned about a methylation disorder. So in your case, this is very likely a true below ideal. Now, I briefly glanced at this prior, and unfortunately I didn't do your report, so I don't know it by heart, but I think you were at 14. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, let me look down so I was gonna go through this, but let's just do it right now, since that was the one that I was really That was that. Here it
There
is.
we go.
Yeah,
So
it was
14.6, yeah. So you're in what we call a risk range. There's actually no chance of physiological disorder that will zap performance. But there's a greater than 40% chance that if you do nothing about this,
Mhm.
then you will drift into a range that is considered low for an athlete and will zap performance. And so this is what we call our risk range. So that's why you have this soft recommendation. Let's try and increase via the diet. Now you have a healthy diet. And so, chances are you're maintaining levels. And I think I looked at your old report. I actually have it here. You were at 14.1. So you're 14.1 then, you're 14.6 now. You maintain a healthy diet. Basically, you're maintaining.
Okay, that's cool.
But it
Yeah,
means
so
you have a really high utilization rate of
yeah,
folate.
so my metabolism is crazy fast. That's when I switch. So I call myself a pegan. So I eat tons of healthy grass-fed proteins, wild fish and shrimp and stuff like that. And then I eat tons of vegetables. I used to be a very high carbohydrate, very high carbohydrate diet, and I got extreme adrenal fatigue on that diet. And I was out for like 18 months. I mean, I was just so sick. And so when I started eating more fats, good fats, and more good proteins, like I just feel like a completely different person. So for me, like that was just the surprise. But I guess I could always have a few more vegetables. Never enough, right?
Never enough. Yeah.
Okay, and then so this was the other from my red blood cells, the reticulocyte count. What is that?
So those are immature red blood cells. So this is what your body has been producing over the last couple of weeks, and those cells have not matured in the cells that are actually carrying oxygen to muscles. So if they're low, then that is a warning sign basically that your body's not keeping up with production, and therefore in the next 6 to 8 weeks you're at risk of seeing a little decline in performance, or just having a period where maybe you find that your heart rate's elevated, you just are missing that extra gear. Now, this is more of a screening, and so when we see reticulocyte, that launches us into looking at the micronutrients that are involved with red blood cell production, looking at hematocrit, hemoglobin, red blood cell count, and then most importantly, asking and looking at the athlete questionnaire and looking at volume, the type of training that they're doing. Because if it's the type of training that typically causes or doesn't require a high red blood cell production rate, then a reticulocyte of 0.6 is no problem at all.
Right.
But if it's 25 hours a week and there's 10% of that is at intensity, then we need to address it.
Right. So yeah, my training load really wasn't that high at the time of the blood test. So that's why, I don't really know. So what would I do to optimize that or help that?
So if your training load wasn't high, which is, I'm assuming that the recommendations here are just kind of laissez-faire, not many recommendations around reticulocytes, and that's because our sports scientists would have gone in and looked at training volume when they saw this and said, it's okay. You're just not engaged in activities that are high red blood cell or that have a high red blood cell destruction rate.
Okay. Okay, cool. And then, so my white blood cells, everything looked good. The only other thing, I think my iron was good, which I was happy about that. Oh, this one, the Bunn creatinine ratio. And this, you were explaining this to me earlier, but if you could explain it to everybody else.
Sure. This is just an indication of mild dehydration. So if we only see the ratio being high and the Bunn and the creatinine serum are not high, then this is just mild dehydration. Okay. So this is just a gentle reminder usually to folks that, hey, just focus on hydration if you didn't. But more often than not in athletes, it has a really high incidence of being high because people worked out the day before, and often the day of a test. So it's not that big of a deal. It matters more to us if we see it quite high and we see creatinine serum or BUN also high, then that can influence the red blood cell findings, and we need to tailor our report and our interpretation accordingly.
Okay. I guess there was one other one. Oh, that was the folate. We already talked about that. And then, so the training tolerance, what does this mean?
So this is really a cumulative picture of how well you're tolerating your current training and how at risk you are to cumulative decline over a season. So what should you be doing to recover after each workout? Now, some athletes can handle really high intensity training and handle 2, 3, 4 days a week of that. Some cannot at all. And in the past, we used to have training plans that were kind of one size fits all, and some people respond, some people don't. Those that don't seek out coaching from other individuals, and we know how that goes. Well, now we have this ability to predict how many rest days that athlete should have if they're okay engaging in high intensity training plans, if they should take a break from weight training during the peak of their triathlon training, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what this section is all about. Okay. So the key indicators, all of them are really key indicators. ALT, AST, those are classically known as liver enzymes, but they are released by skeletal muscle, and they're really important to track for athletes, or they're helpful to track because we see that inflammatory response. Now, if they're high in an athlete, if you ever end up at a doctor's office and ALT and AST are high, typically it's not a concern at all. You're not damaging your liver through sports. It's usually just skeletal muscle influence. Cortisol is a screening test. Cortisol, it's known as a stress hormone. In athletes, it's often going to be a little bit high. If it's low, it's a warning flag to us. If it's really high, it's a warning flag to us.
Right.
Testosterone, everybody knows that's critical to muscle recovery, and more important is looking at free testosterone, because that's the bioavailable form of testosterone. And then DHEA is really tied to both testosterone and cortisol. So very important hormone to test to identify how well the athlete is tolerating this stress.
And then the T3, T4, and TSH.
So those are all thyroid hormones, which, especially in females, are important to track because they help indicate both response to training, tolerance of stress of training, and caloric intake adequacy. So if you're not taking in enough calories, then we're going to see changes in the thyroid hormones.
Okay, so my TSH was a little high, and it says, but my T3 and T4 are ideal, so it's not something to worry about. But if that was, then hypothyroidism, underactive thyroid, would be something to be concerned about.
Correct, and often we do see an exercise-induced bump or increase of TSH, of thyroid stimulating hormone. So when we see that, we want to see T3 and T4 and make sure that they're well within ideal ranges. And that was the case in yours. So T3, T4 looks great, and therefore the high TSH is probably exercise-induced.
Okay, and then this one, the sex hormone binding globulin.
Yep. So that is a really important associative factor to testosterone. As we see sex hormone binding globulin increase, free testosterone is going to decrease. So in endurance athletes especially, anybody who goes months and months of training without adequate rest, and sometimes years, sex hormone binding globulin we're going to tend to see increase cumulatively. And so it's just a good indication for us of where is that person at in their cumulative tolerance of training, and is a break needed, is it not needing what needed? What is it doing to their ability to recover? And so do they need to change your recovery strategy um, because of what they've done the last 3, 6 months, 3 years, whatever it might be?
Right. So this is saying that I should be looking at how I'm feeling and stuff like that as far as recovery.
Yep. So sex hormone binding globulin alone is not that big of a deal. But if we saw it with low free testosterone or below ideal free testosterone,
Mhm.
then that's your first, it's sort of your lowest level of warning
Okay.
that we really need to emphasize recovery.
Got
So
it.
what are you doing after your workouts? Are you going home and working your tail end off and taking on other stresses? Are you running people around? Whatever it might be,
Right.
recovery is important, and you know that
Yes.
as well as anybody. Yeah.
That's just a reminder to always make sure we're recovering on a daily basis and not just, once in a while.
Correct.
Right. All right, cool. And then this was also a surprise to me because my cholesterol has usually always been very low. But I will say that I've been eating an extra large amount of ghee lately. And I wonder if could that cause my LDLs to be high?
That could influence. Workouts also can mobilize LDL.
Okay.
So if you had a recent hard workout, that sometimes we'll see a bump. But what's important for athletes is, our LDL ranges are established with, normal population.
Okay.
And there's some debate right now, and debate coming from our entity as well, based on, the research that we have. How important is LDL really, and what is that top end? And to see your finding at 109 as an active person, that is not relevant at all
Okay,
to
good.
somebody like me, and I'm willing to go on record saying
Okay. So, I mean, not a funny story, but when I was really adrenal fatigued, my total cholesterol was 120. I mean, I felt like I couldn't move. Like I had no energy. So when I see that this is my cholesterol, I'm actually very happy because
absolutely.
I have so much more energy. You know what I mean? And, I heard also a statistic that everybody who has a high IQ has a cholesterol over 200. So that's my goal.
I better check mine. Yeah, and the truth is, for athletes, years ago we went through the low fat craze, and there's still some ripple from that messaging. I recall being in, I think, high school, college during that phase, and we need fats, and especially as folks living an active lifestyle, you need fats to support the hormones, to support muscle metabolism. And so seeing cholesterol on the higher end is really, it's not concerning, especially if VLDL is where it's at for you. That's 14. That's really the one that we don't like, that one. But the HDL is good cholesterol. Total cholesterol, we want to see fats in the system. So your findings are to me, they're ideal.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So this just explains a little bit more of like how you come up with the scoring system. And, I just feel like it's such a comprehensive test. So I just wanted to encourage the athletes to take more advantage of the relationship we have with you guys. And the cool thing is every athlete that goes through my system on my store, I actually get a copy of the results, unless you don't want me to. So it's great because then we can, discuss them and see how we can change your nutrition if we need to. But most importantly, your training plan, according and based on the results, if there are some red flags to address, right?
Yep, this information really is most powerful when it's in the hands of the coach, the nutritionist as well. And if I can mention one thing, I mentioned that I would share a new offering. Yeah. So around June, we should be releasing a product that's called ABT She, and it adds 4 hormones to the panel, and allows us to periodize or time the recommendations. So based on the menstrual cycle. So we know that iron utilization, certain, well, calorie burning, et cetera, they all change based on hormone changes within the menstrual cycle. And so you're going to have 4 different sets of recommendations based on week 1, 2, 3, 4. So really cool product. A lot of research has gone into it. A lot of smart folks have been a part of this new product offering, and we're
Very
excited
cool.
to launch it this
And
summer.
so how would that work? Is it just still a simple blood test to find it out, but it's just going to be its own category on the choices down there?
Yep, same process. It's just the report is going to be a little bit different, and females are going to they're going to get a bigger advantage that we can't give males in timing the recommendations.
That's very cool.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep.
That'll be great. So we did have a raffle prize, and I already gave the raffle away. So one of our athletes who's going to camp is going to be submitting his blood work. So he'll reach out to you, I guess, or hopefully he'll do his test before we leave for camp. I'm excited to see how that is. But thank you so much, Dr. Rock. Is there anything else you want to talk about or mention?
My pleasure. We love working with folks like you, and we're always open. So if anybody has questions, they can email us via the website.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Have a great day.
You too.
All right, let me push stop.